We saw carriages which contained civilians who'd driven out from Washington to witness the operations. A Connecticut boy said, "There's our senator," and some of our men recognized other members of Congress. We thought it wasn't a bad idea to have the great men from Washington come out to see us thrash the Rebs. Private James Tinkham. The whole region seems literally filled with soldiery. One of the finest armies ever marshaled on the globe now wakes up these long, stagnant fields and woods. General McClellan is here and commands in person. Reverend A.M. Stewart. A man's conceit dwindles when he crawls into an unteaseled shirt, trousers too short and baggy behind, coat too long at both ends, and a cap as shapeless as a feed bag. A photograph of any one of them, covered with yellow dust or mosaics of mud, could ornament any mantle, north or south, as a true picture of our boy. Never to me was the sight of reinforcing legions so welcome as on that Sunday evening, when Buell's advance column deployed on the bluffs of Pittsburgh Landing. It was a most beautiful morning. It really seemed like Sunday in the country at home. The boys were scattered around camp, polishing and brightening their muskets and brushing up and cleaning their shoes, jackets, and trousers for inspection. Private Leander Stillwell. April 21st. 16 days have now been spent in this place. Our grand army has again come to a halt. Under the dry pine leaves where we encamp, a great secesh army of woodticks have wintered. Few are so happy as not to find half a dozen of these villainous bloodsuckers sticking in his flesh every morning. Chaplain A.M. Stewart. New Bern, North Carolina, March 20th, 1862. To Mr. John Webster, Jr., Deer Isle, Maine, dear sir. It is with pain that I have to announce to you the death of your brother, Charles Gray. By his good conduct and bravery while with me, he had risen to the rank of corporal, and had he lived, I should have promoted him again. He was shot through the body at the Battle of New Bern. His last words were, "We will never give up." He is buried here. His effects I shall send home at the earliest opportunity. Yours truly, E.A.P. Brewster, Captain, Commanding Company A, 23rd Massachusetts. September 16th. That night I lay beside the Charlestown Pike and watched until morning the grimy columns come pouring up from the pontoons. It was a weird, uncanny sight, and drove sleep from my eyes. It was something demon-like, a scene from an inferno. They were silent as ghosts, ruthless and rushing in their speed, ragged, earth-colored, disheveled, and devilish. The shuffle of their badly shod feet on the hard surface of the pike was so rapid as to be continuous, like the hiss of a great serpent. The spectral, ghostly picture will never be erased from my memory. Captain Edward Hastings Ripley. April 11th, 1862. I firmly believe that before many centuries more, science will be the master of man. The engines he will have invented will be beyond his strength to control. Someday science shall have the existence of mankind in its power, and the human race commit suicide by blowing up the world. Henry Adams. I saw men in gray and brown clothes running through the camp. And I saw something else, too, something I'd never seen before. A gaudy sort of thing with red bars, a rebel flag. We fired a volley and saw the rebels running. The boys were saying constantly in great glee, "We've whipped them. We'll hang Jeff Davis to a sour apple tree. They're running. The war's over." When the grave was ready, we placed the bodies therein 2 deep. All the monument reared to those brave men was a board upon which I cut with my pocket knife the words 125 rebels. The sun went down, the thunder died away, the musketry ceased. Bivouac fires gleamed out as if a great city had lighted its lamps. I wish you could hear Joshua give off a command and see him ride along the battalion on his white horse. He looked so splendidly. He told me last night that he never felt so well in his life. Tom Chamberlain. We have been living on the contents of those boxes you sent to us. Nothing was spoiled except that card of biscuits. Those were molded some, but we used over half of them in a soup. Thank Mr. Burdix 1,000 times for me, also Mrs. Maxson for those pies. And those fried cakes and ginger snaps are first rate, and the dried berries, they're nice, and the dried beef and applesauce, that was first rate. Dear Fanny, I don't know what we should have done without our band. It's acknowledged by everyone to be the best in the division. Every night about sundown, Gilmore gives us a splendid concert, playing selections from the operas and some very pretty marches, quick steps, waltzes, and the like. I was within a few feet of General Sickles when he received the wound by which he lost his leg. A terrific explosion seemed to shake the very earth, instantly followed by another. I noticed that his pants and drawers at the knee were torn clear off to the leg, which was swinging loose. He was carried from the field, coolly smoking a cigar. We sat and heard in silence. What other expression had we that was not mean for such an awful universe of battle? All in the rear of the crest for 1,000 yards was the field of the shell's blind fury. Ambulances passing down the Tarrytown Road with wounded men were struck. The hospitals were riddled. Frank Haskell. More than half a mile their front extends, man touching man, rank pressing rank. The red flags wave, their horsemen gallop up and down. The arms of 13,000 men, barrel and bayonet, gleam in the sun. A sloping forest of flashing steel. Right on they move, as with one soul. None on that crest now need be told. The enemy is advancing. Every eye could see his legions, an overwhelming, resistless tide, an ocean of armed men sweeping upon us. All was orderly and still upon our crest, no noise and no confusion. General Gibbon rode down the lines, cool and calm, and in an unimpassioned voice, he said to the men, "Do not hurry, men, and fire too fast. Let them come up close before you fire, and then aim slow." Seconds are centuries, minutes, ages. Men fire into each other's faces, not 5 feet apart. There are bayonet thrusts, saber strokes, pistol shots, men going down on their hands and knees, spinning round like tops, throwing out their arms, gulping blood, falling, legless, armless, headless. There are ghastly heaps of dead men. Those defending the heights became more and more desperate as our men approached the top. They shouted Chickamauga as though the word itself were a weapon. They thrust cartridges into guns by the handsful. They lighted the fuses of shells and rolled them down, but nothing could stop the force of the charge. On the morning of May 4th, 1864, we with the entire Grand Army of the Potomac were in motion toward the Rapidan. The dawn was clear, warm, and beautiful. As the almost countless encampments were broken up, with bands in all directions playing lively airs, banners waving, regiments, brigades, and divisions falling into line, the scene, even to eyes long familiar with military displays, was one of unusual grandeur. Chaplain A.M. Stewart. It is now conceded that all idea of British intervention is at an end. I want to hug the Army of the Potomac for Gettysburg. I want to get the whole Army of Vicksburg drunk at my own expense. I want to fight some small man and lick him. Henry Adams. It grew dark and we built a fire. The dead were all around us. Their eyeless skulls seemed to stare steadily at us. The trees swayed and sighed gently in the soft wind. The men were calmly writing their names and home addresses on slips of paper and pinning them to the backs of their coats so that their bodies might be recognized and their fate made known to their families at home. General Horace Porter. I like to stand aside and look a long, long while up at the dome. It comforts me somehow. Walt Whitman. Aroused and angry, I'd thought to beat the alarm and urge relentless war. But soon my fingers failed me, my face drooped, and I resigned myself to sit by the wounded and soothe them, or silently watch the dead. Walt Whitman. Lorenzo Strong, Company A, 9th United States Cavalry, shot by a shell last Sunday, right leg amputated on the field, took a turn for the worse. I stayed and saw all. The doctor comes in and gives him a little chloroform. One of the nurses constantly fans him, for it is fearfully hot. He asks to be raised up, and they put him in a half-sitting posture. He called for Mark repeatedly, half deliriously all day. Life ebbs, runs now with the speed of a mill race. His eyes turn back. A crowd, including 2 or 3 doctors, several students, and many soldiers, has silently gathered. The struggle goes on and dwindles, a little more and a little more, and then welcome oblivion, painlessness, death. A pause. The crowd drops away. June 17, 1864. Dearest Mother, this place seems to have got the better of me. I think I shall come home for a short time. Spy Johnson, shot near Coffin. Can those be men? Are they not really corpses? They lay there, most of them, quite still, but with a horrible look in their eyes. The dead there are not to be pitied as much as some of the living that have come from there, if they can be called living. Dear Nat, I think well of the President. He has a face like a Hoosier Michelangelo, so awful ugly it becomes beautiful, with its strange mouth, its deep-cut crisscross lines, and its donut complexion. I do not dwell on the supposed failures of his government. He has shown an almost supernatural tact in keeping the ship afloat at all. I more and more rely upon his idiomatic Western genius. Walt Whitman. There are rumors that we are to cut loose and march south to the ocean. We're in fine shape and I think could go anywhere Uncle Billy would lead. Private Theodore Upson. It seems the good people in the North are terribly worried about us. They called us the Lost Army, and some thought we would never show up again. I don't think they know what kind of an army this is that Uncle Billy has. Why, if Grant can keep Lee and his troops busy, we can tramp all over this Confederacy. I see the president almost every day. I saw him this morning about 8:30, coming into business. We've got so that we exchange bows, and very cordial ones. I see very plainly Abraham Lincoln's dark brown face with its deep-cut lines, the eyes always to me with a latent sadness in the expression. None of the artists or pictures has caught the deep, though subtle and indirect expression of this man's face. There's something else there. One of the great portrait painters of 2 or 3 centuries ago is needed. Walt Whitman. I have just this moment heard from the front. There is nothing yet of a movement, but each side is continually on the alert, expecting something to happen. To think we are to have here soon what I've seen so many times, the awful loads and trains and boatloads of bloody and pale and wounded young men again. For that is what we certainly will have. I see all the signs here. Walt Whitman. Strange, is it not, that battles, martyrs, blood, even assassination, should so condense a nationality. Walt Whitman. If one army drank the joy of victory and the other the bitter draught of defeat, it was a joy moderated by the recollection of the cost at which it had been purchased, and a defeat mollified by the consciousness of many triumphs. If the victors could recall a Malvern Hill, an Antietam, a Gettysburg, a Five Forks, the vanquished could recall a Manassas, a Fredericksburg, a Chancellorsville, a Cold Harbor. Number 220, Statue of American Soldier, price $450. When used as a family monument and photos of the deceased soldier can be furnished, we will model a new head in a true likeness. The extra cost will be but $150. The Monumental Bronze Company, Bridgeport, Connecticut. Somewhere they crawled to die, alone, in bushes, low gullies, or on the sides of hills. There in secluded spots, their skeletons, bleached bones, tufts of hair, buttons, fragments of clothing, are occasionally found yet. Our young men, once so handsome and so joyous, taken from us, the son from the mother, the husband from the wife, the dear friend from the dear friend. Mother prepared breakfast and other meals as usual, but not a mouthful was eaten all day by either of us. We each drank half a cup of coffee, that was all. Little was said. We got every newspaper, morning and evening, and passed them silently to each other. Walt Whitman.